for those of you who were with us yesterday, welcome back. And for those of you who are new today, welcome. I'm Amanda Aguilard. I'm the co-founder of Elefant and host for today's webinar. For those of you who don't already know, I have an accounting practice in New Orleans, but I also have this little project, which is to train accountants and bookkeepers on technology. So today we're talking about bank reconciliation and month-end validation. So this is probably the session of the 4, if you're joining us for all 4 of them. This is probably the session of the 4 that is the most in the nitty-gritty of the details of how to use Xero. This is probably the piece of Xero that you will use the most, bank reconciliation. So we kind of think about small business accounting being handled mostly through bank transactions, right? So probably for small businesses, 90% of their transactions come through a bank or a credit card. So if we can get our arms around that and do that very efficiently and accurately, then really we're doing pretty well. So let's go ahead and get back into Xero where we left it yesterday. So for those of you who are new today, this is the Xero dashboard. This is the landing page when you come into Xero, and it's also often where you'll start your bank reconciliation. As I mentioned yesterday, the left side of this screen, these are the bank accounts, these tiles. There's a tile for each bank account. We're actually going to add one in a second, and a little cash in and out. But each tile shows one bank or credit card account, and you hover over the title, and you can drill down and get into each of the bank accounts. Another way to see bank accounts is if we go to accounting and bank accounts. This will actually show us every bank account that is in Xero, whereas the dashboard, we can hide tiles. So if we have old credit cards or old bank accounts that we don't want to see on the dashboard, we can hide them, whereas this bank accounts will show everything that's not, every bank account that's not archived or deleted. Okay, so we are going to add a new bank account. We are going to add a big bank savings account now. So let me show you how we do that from the screen. Add bank account and find our bank. Our bank is Big Bank, which doesn't exist. So Xero can't find it. So we're going to add it anyway. And we're going to add a big bank savings. Now, my naming convention for bank accounts is generally the name of the bank, the type of the account, and then the last 4 digits of the account number. I think this is, I've been doing this for a long time. It is well worth it to change your bank account names to be something that is clear, because when you go through bank reconciliation, especially clients that have lots of bank and credit card accounts, it gets confusing. So if you just have savings, or if you just have Chase, sometimes you can mix up accounts. So I find it's really helpful to name it the bank, the type of account, and then the extension being the last 4 digits of the bank account. And I need to tell Xero whether this is a credit card or not. If it's a credit card, Xero is going to flip it to a liability rather than an asset, but this is just a savings. So I need to put in the account number here. It's US dollars, and I'll save. So we are brought back to our bank accounts dashboard, and we see the new account is up at the top. I prefer for checking to go on top. There's usually more activity in the checking. So I'm going to just use these buttons down here to change the order of my tiles. And as I mentioned, the default is for bank accounts to be on the dashboard. If you don't want them on the dashboard, you can use this toggle in and on and off to move it. Okay, so I'm going to now get some activity into our savings account. So we have a blank savings account down here. So we're going to, ideally, we would want to connect a bank feed, right? So Xero works most efficiently when it is connected to a bank feed, because we are getting transactions in every night. If that's not possible, we're going to have to import our bank statements. So if we can't establish a bank feed directly, the next best option is to import either an OFX file or a QIF file. And let me show you where where we see those file types. If you go to manage account and import statement, Xero on the right side is going to tell you what file types can be imported. So OFX is the recommended file type, but all these other ones, these are Quicker and QuickBooks files. They will work. Xero will generally read them. And worst case scenario is a CSV. So not every bank might have these file types, but you know, I haven't yet seen a bank that you can't export transactions down into some kind of CSV file. Now, I qualify that by saying a lot of banks will limit how far back you can go. So you may not be able to get all the transactions back, but there are, even if you can't get transactions down electronically, there are conversion tools that work really well. So has anybody used MoneyThumb? And I know there are others. I think Auto Entry does it as well, but there are conversion tools where we can take a PDF or a paper bank statement and convert it directly into an OFX or a CSV file. So if you have a client that, you know, is a mess and you have lots of history to go back and figure out, then that might be an option for you. If you can only get paper bank statements, one of those tools might be great. Okay, in our case, we're going to use an OFX file for our savings account. So let me go find the file. I browse to our desktop files, and Big Bank Savings OFX is going to get pulled in. Okay, so now we have 24 transactions in our OFX file. Now I can toggle back and forth between accounts. So our Big Bank checking is also empty. So we want to go ahead and import the statement for that too, but in our case, we don't have an OFX file. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to show you what the CSV file looks like, because I want you guys to see how the layout is in case you need to use this. Okay, so for a checking account or for any bank statement import, there are 4 columns that are default on the template. 2 required columns are date and amount. So we can import a bank statement if we have the date and we have the amount. We can have the payee, we can have the description. We can add on columns for reference or check number if we want. But the required columns by Xero are these 2. Notice that the amount, whether it's draws or deposits, the amounts are all in one column. So deposits are positive, draws are negative. That's really important because a lot of banks, when you download from the bank, it's going to give you debits in one column, credits in another. You're going to have to format the data so that everything's in one column, plus or minus. And also, we want to make sure that this column is in a number format. And similarly with the date, we want to make sure this is a date format. And otherwise it will fail. So that's one of the reasons that an import might fail. Another reason an import might fail is that, you know, you could have a blank line in between. So if there was a missing line here, the whole import will fail. So we want to make sure that we don't have any blank lines. Again, like that's something that's not a common issue, but if you had months and months of data and you had been manipulating them, the columns and the rows, you may end up with some mistake of having a blank row, which will make it fail. So let me save this, and then we're going to pull this up into our checking. And Xero gives us a little preview when we use CSV files, because it wants to be sure that it is mapping the columns to the correct field. So it gives us a little mapping here and shows us, okay, well, date, these would be our CSV column titles, assigned to date, transaction, payee, and description. It will read it and make a best guess. But if this wasn't correct, we could change it. So maybe this is actually the reference or check number. So you can do the mapping here. And you will see on the right side, it gives you like a preview of what the data will look like in Xero. And you can scroll through the CSV data to see. So it looks good to me. So we'll go ahead and import those. All right, so now we're in the bank reconciliation piece, and we can get to it also from the dashboard. These blue buttons will give us a visual as to how many lines there are from the bank statement that have yet to be reconciled. So if we click on one of these, that'll bring us over into the bank reconciliation piece. And I'm going to toggle back to the checking account because that's the one I want to start in. All right, so what's important is to pay attention to these 4 tabs because they all mean, they're all sometimes similar and sometimes different pieces of information. So from the left, the reconcile tab, I call this one at a time bank reconciliation. We'll go through that in a second, but it's basically taking one bank transaction and coding it on this side. So bank on the left, coding it on the right. Cash coding is taking most of what's on this reconcile tab. It will not pull over any transactions that Xero finds a match for, which I'll explain in a second, but it takes most of what's on this reconcile tab and blows it out into a spreadsheet. So rather than having a tile for each transaction, we have a row for each transaction, and the transaction data is in each of these columns. And I'll show you why that's very cool in a minute. Bank statements and account transactions tabs. So these sometimes have the same transactions. The difference is that the bank statements tab is going to show every transaction that's come in to a bank account or credit card account from either a bank feed or a bank statement import. So you can see on in the source column imported, these are all the transactions that we just imported. So it's showing us bank lines. Account transactions is the GL. Okay, think of it as the general ledger. So it is the GL with reconciled and unreconciled bank lines, transaction lines. So until these the items on the reconcile screen have been coded, they're not going to hit this account transactions tab, because the coding of this on this page, or cash coding, that's when we assign it to a general ledger account, right? So we're gonna come back here, we're gonna assign these to accounts on the GL. So until that's done, those transactions are not gonna show up here. I just want to point that out because sometimes you'll go to look for something and it's very confusing because you can't find it on this tab. It means that it hasn't been reconciled yet. This tab also includes general ledger lines that are not reconciled to a bank account. Can anybody give me an example of something that's on the GL but hasn't been tied to a bank account? Anybody have examples of that? How about bills and invoices? So in Xero, we are booking our receivables as invoices, we're booking our payables as bills. Those are on the GL when we create them. Remember, if you were on yesterday, we talked about that awaiting payment bucket being the general ledger balance of receivables or payables. So we're recognizing revenue and hitting an invoice, but until the payment comes through and gets matched up, that invoice is unpaid, or it's waiting to be matched up with a payment on the bank screen. So those unpaids will be in account transactions if we have told Xero that a payment is expected and it's going to come through this bank account. Okay, so let's go back to doing some coding. All right, so when I have clients that either are new clients that have catch-up work, where I have a lot of data that I kind of have to process in a short amount of time. So think about onboarding, like, people show up at during tax season, and they haven't done their books all year. So you've got to do a whole 12 months worth of activity. The way I handle that is I get all the transactions from the bank into Xero, and then I go over to my cash coding tab, because visually it's much easier to see patterns in data and to see big data at once. Where the reconcile screen, you only get, I don't know, maybe 10 transactions on a page. Cash coding, I can load lots more than that. So we're going to start at our cash coding tab. I mentioned yesterday, if you weren't on, that anything in Xero that's blue can be clicked on. So either it is a drill down or it's a sorting header. In the case of cash coding, these blue titles here are sorting headers. So looking at the way the data is coming in from Big Bank, it looks like they populate the payee field. So I'm going to click my payee header to sort, and that's going to group together similar pay or the same payees. So I can see again at a high level which transactions are recurring, which transactions my client has every month, every week, and that's going to give me a clue as to which payees I need to create bank rules for. So bank rules to me are one of the most popular, one of the best tools for efficiency in Xero. In fact, at some point I wrote like a little love letter to bank rules. I'll have to dig that up. It was like 10 reasons why bank rules are great or something. Because I really believe that bank rules in Xero are like just the best thing. So let me show you why that is. So I'm looking at my data and I notice that I've got Acme Chemical, I've got Chlorine Products R Us, I've got Wholesale Pool Supplies. These are all chemicals for our pool company. So let's create a bank rule for all of these. The quickest way to create a bank rule in Xero is to start where the transaction is and use the pull down to create bank rule. That's going to auto populate as much of the bank rule screen as Xero can. So this is the bank rule screen in Xero. There is number 1 here. These are all numbered steps. Number 1 is the criteria match. So when whatever criteria we set up here matches to a transaction in Xero, then it's going to kick off 2 through 7. Okay, so 1 is the criteria, 2 through 7 are the things that happen afterwards. So it pulled in that my payee was Acme Chemical Company. I generally change this to contains just because transactions from different locations of the same company often come in a bank feed as different, like with different characters, like store number such and such or a location. So I usually use contains rather than equals. And I'm going to create one bank rule for all 3 of my pool chemical companies. So let's change this when the money spent matches any of the transactions. I'm going to create one for contains wholesale, which is my wholesale pool supply company, and Chlorine Products R Us. So I'm telling Xero anytime you see I'm gonna actually just make this Acme. Anytime you see one of these 3 in the payee, then kick off 2 through 7. The contact is going to be the payee from the bank. The one thing I can either force it, like if this was only one payee, I could say Chlorine Products R Us and make Xero put in the vendor. In our case, we have 3 different payees. They're coming from the bank. This is a fine option. But what I never want to pick is entered during reconciliation, because it's going to stop the automation and it's going to make me type something in. And that's the thing I want to avoid at all costs. So let's make this payee from the bank. And then 3 and 4 are how the dollars get allocated. So 3 will take the first fixed dollar amount off the top and put it to a whatever GL account you want. And then 4 takes the remainder and allocates in a percentage by percentage. Anybody have an example of a transaction that you may want the first certain dollar amount off of to go to one GL account with the extra going somewhere else? Does anybody have an example of that? No examples? Well, the best thing I can come up with is LinkedIn, where you might have a LinkedIn subscription for, I don't even know what it costs anymore, $80 a month. And then your company might also use LinkedIn for advertising or for recruiting. So you may have a base fee of $80. That would be a subscription or a membership. And then anything above that would be advertising or recruiting, right? So that's really the best example I can come up with for 3 and 4 together. If you guys have any, go ahead and put them in the questions panel, because I've been using the LinkedIn one for a while. I'd love something new. In most cases, though, we are going to just take that remainder and allocate items in a percentage by percentages. I will tell you that as long as the percentages add up to 100%, you're good. Xero will run the bank rule. So I have Elefant, which is this training company. I also have Aguilard Accounting, which is my accounting firm. So there are a lot of expenses on the there are a lot of expenses that we have that come through that I split between the two companies. So I create a bank rule that 50% of, let's say, internet. 50% of internet goes to internet expense, and then the other 50% goes to the due to or from Elefant account. So we can split by percentages. But as I mentioned, as long as it adds up to 100%, it will run. One trick we have is that we have used, for one of my clients in particular, we used the bank rule as a way to gross up sales. So I have a glass blower client who occasionally would go to art markets and would have like a little handheld, I think it was issued by the bank, like a handheld merchant credit card machine. And so he would get and he was doing his own bookkeeping for the most part, but he would get his deposits and he would code his deposits to sales, which, as you guys know, those deposits are net of merchant fees. And so he wasn't ever recognizing the merchant fee. The idea that I was going to ask him to log into his bank or merchant account to figure out exactly the fees for each deposit, that was never going to happen. Like, I just knew the client was never going to do that. Definitely not like on a monthly basis. So what we ended up doing was creating a bank rule where we took the sales account and grossed the deposit up by 3%. So I said, if you had, if your deposit was $80, which is probably, $83 sale or something like that, take the $80 deposit, have Xero gross up the sales by an extra 3%, and then here, let's hit bank or merchant fees for the negative 3%. Does that make sense? So we were taking that deposit amount, grossing it up so that we were approximating the sales and we were approximating the merchant fees here, so that we were recognizing it because he needed to know what he was spending in merchant fees. At the end of the year, we pulled the statement and we did a journal entry to adjust it, but it was within like a reasonable amount. I mean, I want to say it was within like $25. I mean, 3% is a pretty good average for merchant fees. So the point is, if it adds up to 100%, it will work, and these can be positives or negatives. All right. In our case, we are going to hit cost of goods sold chemicals for the sales, the purchases from each of these vendors. All right, set the reference. The reference will be set. No, we do not want to hit by me during bank rec because that slows the whole thing down. So reference can be from the reference. In our case, there was not any information in the reference column, so I can have it pull from the description. Run this rule on. You can run it on all bank accounts or one bank account. I usually default to all bank accounts just so that if we have client credit cards where you got employee credit cards, they're going the same places, so they probably have the same kinds of expenses. Or we have credit cards where the credit card might be replaced at some point. We don't have to go in and redo the bank rules. I generally pick all bank accounts, but you can specify it to one credit card if in fact your employees have different, if you need to code the same vendor to different GL accounts on different credit cards. And then give the rule a title. So the default is going to be the vendor. So Acme was the vendor that we pulled in first. I'm going to change this to cost of goods sold chem. One thing I always do, even if the vendor, let's say even if this was just Acme, and that's the only vendor this rule was for, I always put the coding as the part of the title. And you'll see in a second where that title shows up. I find that it's much easier to see on the face of bank reconciliation where the coding is rather than just the vendor. If I put Acme and that was the title of my bank rule, I wouldn't know, is that cost of goods sold chemicals, cost of goods sold supplies? And I'd have to make a decision about applying the bank rule. If I wasn't sure, I'd have to open up the bank rule and go back. So I always put the coding in the title. But for our example here, I'm just gonna put cost of goods sold chem. All right, so let me show you on the reconciliation screen what those bank rules look like, and you'll see what I mean. So I have the option here to click OK and apply the rule that we just created. So this is what I mean by it's nice when you can see what the coding looks like. Okay, so that's how we create a bank rule. But let me show you the most powerful way to use bank rules. In Xero, I told you that cash coding includes the lines that are not matched. It also includes bank rules. So if I scroll down, you can see that Xero's applied that bank rule to dozens of transactions in cash coding. So if you set up good bank rules for your clients, take time to do it. When you log in the morning and you go to reconcile the books, you're starting at the dashboard here. We can click once, go into our checking account. We click twice to go into cash coding, and we click a third time to save and reconcile all. And without touching a keyboard, in just 3 clicks, I've reconciled 32 lines. So I think that's really powerful when we can, take time to create bank rules, especially when our clients have tons of recurring transactions. We just go in, click 3 times, and we've taken care of the low-hanging fruit. Then we go back and figure out the rest of the stuff. But we get rid of the noise. So another way to use cash coding, and this is actually truly the feature that made me pick Xero over QuickBooks. This was back in 2013 when QuickBooks was terrible. I saw this in Xero and I was like, this is fantastic. So cash coding is here. I sort by payee, and I can bulk code. So my interest earned, I just click the box to the left, hold down the shift key, click the box to the left of the one at the bottom, and that will highlight all of the same transaction type for me. And then I can go over here, select interest income. I'm tabbing out, and it applies the coding to all 3 lines. So pretty quick to do that. So it makes cleanup and write-up work a lot easier. All right. So let's go back to one at a time reconciliation. So this is bank rec with bank rules and cash coding. But after we get all that, like I said, low-hanging fruit out of the way, sometimes we need to focus and pay attention to these at a one-on-one level. So regular old bank reconciliation, let me scroll over and find the transaction I want to show you, is we have a bank line and we code it on the right. So this is what comes from the bank on the left, and then on the right we are basically making the journal entry. So Jean Lafitte gave us some money for labor repair revenue. So I have to have a who, I have to have a what. I can have a description here if I want. I can apply a tracking category here if I want. And I click OK, and that's just regular old one at a time bank reconciliation. Okay. What I want to point out is that when you do that on this side, you are creating a spend or receive money for the bank account, which is basically a journal entry. I say that because some folks are used to being able to post journal entries to cash or bank accounts. You cannot do that in Xero. But a spend or receive money is basically a journal entry where one side of it is a cash or bank account. So if anybody gets frustrated about like, I can't make a journal entry to cash, you just have to create a spend or receive money. It's the same thing. So when we talk about what transactions are showing up here in this account transactions tab, it has to be on the GL. When we do this, the blue card over here on the create, we are putting it on the journal ledger. All right, let's look at some other matching. So Xero has a hierarchy of matching with transactions, and you see the matches because they're bright green and they say okay. I will caution you, like this is a very fun tool. It's like playing video poker, just to click the OK buttons and they go away. It's gamifying accounting, but you really have to pay attention and make sure your staff are paying attention to what they're matching to, because it's much harder to find it and undo it than it is to pay attention on the front end. So Xero has a hierarchy of matching. The first level of that hierarchy is amount. So when Xero sees that a bank line has the exact same dollar amount in the same direction as something that's already on the GL, it's going to match them. So in our case, we have a deposit for 6/31/28, and there's an outstanding invoice for 6/31/28. So Xero says, hey, this deposit, does it match up as the invoice payment? Yes, it does. So I click OK, and when I do that, it's getting rid of the bank line over here, so it's taking it off of the reconcile queue. It is it is showing that the invoice has been paid, and it's increasing the cash in the bank account. So that's just an easy one. That was an easy match. Let's go find something that's a little different. So because Xero matches only by exact dollar amount, transaction to transaction, it's not going to pick up when we have a deposit for multiple invoices. That's what we have here with this beachside hotel center. So to match that to more than one invoice, we're going to click our find and match. We're going to click our find and match link. That's going to take that card, that little create card here, and it's going to blow it out, and it's going to pull in every transaction that's going the same direction as our bank transaction. So this way we can look, and we can actually do a search, beachside or beach. It's going to pull all the outstanding invoices. So we can see clearly that these two transactions, these two invoices, are making up the $2,500 deposit. So find and match to more than one outstanding transaction. We can add details to our bank transactions. So as Best Buy Electronics, we bought something. We'll just call it office supplies. We'll call it office equipment since it's almost $900. Let's say it's a computer. If I want to add the receipt or a picture or any static file, so not a music file or a video file, but any static file, PDF is the best, I can go to the Add Details button on the reconciliation screen and use this PDF icon to attach whatever I'd like. So receipt. Now this receipt will forever be attached to this spend money transaction in Xero, forever. So that's a pretty good policy to attach substantiation back to your transactions. What if we have a minor difference between the transaction we're reconciling and the transaction it applies to? So here's Jack Sparrow, who gave us 5/20/22. I know he has an outstanding invoice, so I'm going to go to find and match to see if I can find it. And I just click Jack, search. I see that he does have an outstanding invoice for 5/19/22. So he overpaid us by $1. So we want to make sure to select this invoice because the transaction applies to the invoice. Problem is that Xero is not going to let us reconcile it until it matches exactly to the dollar, to the penny, really. So we need to make an adjustment for that extra $1. Here are the options. Down at the bottom, you'll see an adjustments button. And you see something that's called minor adjustment. And if the difference between what you're trying to reconcile and the bank line is under a threshold, I'm not sure what the threshold is exactly, a couple dollars, Xero will let you post an adjustment, a minor adjustment. Never, ever, ever do this, because what happens is that this is posting to a liability account called rounding. So if you ever see a client Xero financials and there's a balance in rounding, this is where it comes from. It doesn't ever go away because it's a balance sheet account. So I would say never use this. These minor adjustments are just going to pile up and just clog up your balance sheet. The other adjustment option is bank fee. So we can code this difference to a GL account. Now, even though it's called a bank fee adjustment, that's what it was built for. It's like merchant fees. We can actually select any account here. So I can select bank service charges. I could select labor repair revenue. I can select any GL account that I want here, and it will make that adjustment and post it to the GL account. So we use this one a lot, but we have another option, which is to create an overpayment. So if he gave us $1, I know it's just $1, but we owe it back to him, right? So we can create an overpayment transaction to make up that difference. And the way we do that is to go to a new receive money transaction, because we got an extra $1. And we're going to say we received it as an overpayment. What this is going to do is it's going to create basically a credit in accounts receivable for Jack Sparrow. So it is showing you here, this is going to AR. So I'm just going to save this transaction. Oops, I have to put this description. It's going to save this transaction. It's going to match up the two of them, the actual invoice amount plus an extra $1, and it's going to allow us to reconcile. Now let me show you what happens over in accounts receivable. We played in this yesterday. Business sales overview. Awaiting payment is our AR balance. If I scroll down, I'll see that Jack now has a little sticky note, looks like a credit note for $1 overpayment, right? I can click in and I can see here's the extra $1 we got into Big Bank Checking. When I go to create an invoice to that contact, what's really cool is that Xero is going to give me a prompt and ask me if I want to apply $1. So let's say I had the $10 invoice for something new. I'm going to approve it. Xero is going to give me this little screen. It says, hey, by the way, he has credit. Do you want to use this credit against his invoice? And I just have to tell Xero, yes, I do. And now it's going to show as a at the bottom of the invoice as a payment or as a credit note. Cool. All right, let's go back over to our checking and do a couple more kind of weird accounting things. Okay, partial payment. So I showed you how to apply one payment to two invoices, but what if a payment is not complete satisfaction of an invoice or a bill? We can use partial payment. So let me show you how this works. So Bayside partial payment, I'm going to go to find and match because I want to find the invoice that this is a payment on. And I'm going to see here's Bayside Resort. When I click the button, I get a little split link that pops up. What this means is that Xero's taking that invoice, the outstanding invoice, and it is splitting it between a part that is paid and a part that still remains unpaid. Okay, so it's saying the total balance was $622. Part of it paid is $500. The unpaid part is $122.37. And we're going to click split, and you can see it takes the one line and it divides it into two separate lines down here. And we're just paying for this top one, and okay, and that's done. Has anybody who's used Xero a little bit before seen this in another application, in another way? I'll give you a clue. There's an add-on where folks use this a lot. Thomas, I see Thomas has lost audio. Can you guys hear me? Those of you who are on, can you raise your hand if you can hear me? Okay. Okay, great. So can you guys think of any other example where we might use the split payment? You may have seen this if you've used Xero with a particular add-on before. This is how we reconcile Gusto transactions in Xero. So Gusto sends over a bill to Xero for the entire amount of a payroll, but the draws on the left side come out as one for direct deposits and one for taxes. So we do just this, where we go and find and match and then click the split to split the one bill. Transfers of funds between accounts. So this is really important. This transfer tab, let me explain the use of the transfer tab. Transferring in Xero via this tab means that we are moving money between two accounts that are in Xero, two bank or credit card accounts that are in Xero. Okay, it does not necessarily equate to using online banking and transferring. Sometimes it does, sometimes it doesn't. If you are moving money between any of the accounts that are listed here in bank accounts, you need to use the transfer tab. So if we're moving money between checking and savings, that's an obvious one, but we also use this for credit card payments. So if you are using the checking account to pay a credit card bill where the credit card is in Xero, we use the transfer tab for that. We don't code the payment to the expenses. Those expenses are going to be recognized in the bank feed coming from the credit card. So we would just use the transfer tab. When I mentioned in the very beginning that I name my bank accounts with this 4-digit extension, the reason I do that is because most banks in the bank data here will also give you a 4-digit extension for transfers or payments. And so it makes it really easy to match up on the transfer tab. So here's a transfer to our savings account. So I'm going to click OK. And actually you can do this, you can create a bank rule for transactions as well. This is something that happens often in your clients. Okay, any questions on reconciliation, bank reconciliation? All right, we're about to move into the reconciliation report and then how to find and fix errors. So when you get to inbox 0, where there are no lines left to be reconciled, 0 is going to give you a little note that's like, congratulations, your account is reconciled. It's not really reconciled. Like if you guys have, for those of you with accounting degrees, accounting backgrounds, I think of a reconciliation as you have a balance, or you have a balance from one place, a balance in another place. You match them up and you note the differences. That's a reconciliation. So just coding is not a reconciliation to me. So we need to go through the step of verifying or validating our balances in Xero, which is what I think of as a true reconciliation. So the way we do that is we run a reconciliation report for each account. And you can select the date. You can do this for, you guys know credit cards don't ever close on the end of the month generally. So you can select whichever day the credit card closing date is, or if it's a regular bank account, the day of the last day of the month before, and click update. And Xero is going to give us a bank reconciliation summary. And this is a true bank reconciliation where you have a general ledger balance at the top, you've got all the differences, and then you have a statement balance at the bottom. This statement balance has to, absolutely must tie to the bank statement, okay? If it doesn't, you've got to fix the problem. And I see this all the time in clients. This has to tie. So if it doesn't, we've got to go find the problem. And you've got to go back until you find the problem. So the way we usually do it in the firm is we go back until there's a month that ties, and then we start working forward. And we would use this next tab, the bank statement tab, to find any differences. So the bank statement tab is going to, it's like Xero's version of a bank statement. Xero is recreating the bank statement. I don't have as much data in here to show you very easily. Maybe let's look at the savings. No, I don't have enough data here to show you exactly. Let's go. Oh, you know what? I think all of our data is actually 18. There we go. Okay, so Xero is recreating a bank statement. It's starting with a beginning balance, and it's posting by date all the transactions it knows about that hit the bank. So what I do is I download this. You can export it to Excel. I sort it by deposits and draws, because most bank statements will give me that as a summary total, and I can oftentimes tell which side, where the problem is. Is it on the deposit side or the draw side? If I can't tell that, then I go line by line. I just match it up. So there are basically three possibilities if you have a bank error. One, you have a duplicate transaction that came through the bank feed or import twice that you've got to get rid of. The second option is that something is missing, so you need to add it back in. The third option is that it came in the wrong direction, and that's a situation I actually had recently with Chase. If you use a debit card to purchase something and then to return that thing on the debit card, it showed as 2 expenses. So for whatever reason, Chase was coming in backwards for those returns. So when you have a situation where a transaction is coming in the wrong direction, you have to delete the first one that's wrong and then re-enter the correct one. And those are the last couple things I'm going to show you before we take a little break before the last session. Okay, so deleting a statement. Let's go back to, deleting a line. Let's go back to our checking account. And let's pretend like in our analysis, we realized there is a $74 transaction that came in twice. One of them actually happened and one did not. So we need to get rid of a duplicate. The first thing I'm going to do is look for that amount. Now I'm going to go to account transactions probably and search exact amount, $74. But I don't find anything. So that makes me think, and I could tell this on the reconciliation report as well, that those lines had not been reconciled yet. So let's go back over to reconcile. And I happen to know that these were around the first of the month. So I can see here, I've got the 2 transactions. So if I haven't reconciled them yet, it's very simple to get rid of. One, go to options, delete statement line. Xero will say you only do this if you're removing duplicates, which we are. So I click yes. So now it's gone. If I had reconciled it, so let's pretend like this was already reconciled, then it would show up in account transactions because the process of reconciling it is what puts it on the general ledger. So search exact amount, $74. Here it is, but we're pretending this is a duplicate. So it's 2 steps. First, I have to remove and redo it, which remove and redo means take it off the GL and throw it back in the queue to be reconciled. So I'll say yes. And then I go back over into reconcile and go through that process of just options and delete statement line, okay? So that's how we get rid of a duplicate. Now I will tell you, if you delete lines, don't panic. It's pretty easy to get them back. So under our bank statements line, I would just look for the $74 and I'd see that this one was deleted. This is the one I deleted. I can just click the box and restore it. So if I accidentally delete something that shouldn't have been deleted, you just restore it. And we can actually, I want to point out, you can delete entire statements. So if you have imported, and it's in the same place, bank statements, toggle this over to statements. This will show you every time a statement was imported or a bank feed was pulled down. So if you are doing manual imports and you accidentally import a CSV into the wrong bank account, just come over here to bank statements, switch this to statements, open up the statement by clicking the blue hyperlink, scroll down to the bottom, delete entire statement, and then you can just re-import it into the right one. Okay, let's talk about adding a transaction that didn't come through the bank feed. So if we're missing a transaction, we basically need to make a journal entry for the missing transaction. Remember, I told you can't make a journal entry, but there was a workaround for that. It's called a spend or receive money. So the quickest way to create a spend or receive money is the plus sign up here. So I'm going to create a spend money against the checking account. So this is going back. Sorry, let's go back. I just want to point this out. I'm basically picking on a spend money. I'm picking the credit here. So which of these is the credit side of the journal entry? Oh, it's going to be checking, spending money. And then we had lunch somewhere, and for whatever reason it didn't come through the bank feed. Big lunch, meals and entertainment, save. Now, think about this for a second. based on what we said in the beginning, I'm creating the journal entry. This is not associated yet to a bank line because there is no bank line. So if I created a spend money and then later on 285.45 left the bank account, Xero would give me the big green OK and it would match it and it would be reconciled. That's never going to happen because we've already closed the month and it hasn't shown up. So we have to fake Xero into creating a bank statement line. So this is just the unreconciled journal entry side. I need to create the bank line side. The way we do that is we use a feature in Xero called enable, called mark as reconciled. It's turned off by default in new Xero files, but we can turn it on using the help menu. For whatever reason, they've hidden it here. Help, enable mark as reconciled. And that gives us this extra more pull down that wasn't there before. So if I click the box to the left of the line item, more, mark as reconciled, what that's going to do is force Xero to create a matching bank line to go with this GL line. Okay, so thanks guys, and I will see you over in part 4 in just a few minutes. See ya.